Well, inflation and world events are impacting all of us, with many families struggling to afford things like food. How is our agriculture sector doing during these challenging times? We certainly want to see them succeed. Our guest today is Shaun Haney, who joins us from Lethbridge. He's the editor of realagriculture.com. Shaun, welcome to Bridge City News. Great to have you on today.
It's great to be here. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. So first of all, looking back at 2022, can you give us a bit of a snapshot of how the ag sector in southern Alberta fared this year? Where did we do well and where did we do poorly?
Yeah, I think one of the big things, if you look at comparing 22 to 21 on the cropping side of the equation, is much better growing conditions. Although I would say southern Alberta is still pretty drought stricken. We could definitely use some moisture as we head into the spring. Overall production, though, was in much better shape compared to 2021. And that's really true across the bulk of the three prairie provinces. I would say the area that is a little bit more on the struggle bus when it comes to profitability is definitely the livestock sector. Feed costs have really been a real challenge for a lot of livestock producers. Of course, like north of Lethbridge, Picture Butte is an example of being the feed, the cattle feeding center of Canada, and producers in that area have really had to deal with higher feed costs and tighter margins.
Yeah, it seems like a higher feed costs is affecting all of us, whether we're at the grocery store or the farmers feeding, feeding their livestock. It's true. It's affecting everybody. So how much has farming changed over the last decade? I assume that over the winter, ag producers do some analysis of what worked and maybe what didn't. So is there more data available now to study that can help improve things for next growing season?
Yeah, I think just like any other industry, there's more and more tools available to help people manage their businesses. So whether you're an entrepreneur, running a plumbing business at Edmonton, or you're farming in southern Alberta, it's you got to know your numbers. And I think that's what a lot of farmers especially this time of the year, for the people that are cash cropping, they're growing pulses and wheat and canola, crops like that. This is kind of a little bit of a slower time in a sense, or a change of roles. I would put it that way, in the sense that they're, the crop's in the bin, harvest is complete, cold weather has set in, the snow is flying. It's a good time to get some office work done, and that office work really does encompass looking back on the season that just happened. Where did I make good decisions? Where did I make some, maybe some not so great decisions, and how could my decision making been different? Would I have changed anything in hindsight? And try to apply some of that gain knowledge to the year ahead. Now, every year is not the same as the year before, but there's a lot of experience and information passed down from generation to generation when it comes to farming and agriculture in general. And so that's a big part of it, is looking back on the year that was. Now, a lot of that, though, has been computerized, digitized. A lot more farmers now are using data tools, whether that's precision software, yield maps, field maps, variable rate fertilizing, things like that. There's a lot more technology involved than, say, 20, 30 years ago, but the premise is still the same. Put the seed in the ground, make sure you get rid of the weeds, and harvest a high quality crop.
Okay, so Shaun, when putting together a specific plan for spring, what does that look like practically? What kinds of things do farmers have to figure out and prepare for?
Well, specifically heading into 2023, I think some really tough decisions. Fertilizer prices have been, very volatile over the past 24 months. We have seen that calm down somewhat. The volatility is sort of left a little bit, so maybe it gives farmers a little bit more time. But farmers know this: fertilizer is much more expensive than it was 24 months ago. Thank goodness the crop is also worth a lot more as well. Now, I think that's one of the misconceptions that people have, is that, hey, food prices are up in the grocery store, farmers must be doing really well. Farmers work on the margin, so their cost structures have increased immensely at the same time. So for farmers thinking about the 23 season, they're really trying to manage that margin, cost versus revenue, and put that plan together that's going to give them the highest probability of success. So what goes into the rotation? What does it look like? What am I going to plant? What fertilizer and nutrients am I going to need? Trying to sketch the plan together on what order of crops would go in the ground. Really things like that. Those plans can change, of course. That Mother Nature does play a role in this. So you have to kind of roll with the punches, so to speak. But it's really about game planning stuff out and having plan A, B, and C.
Okay, so you mentioned Mother Nature there, of course. We're all at the mercy. So ag producers are often, of course, at the mercy of weather patterns and other threats to the health of their crops or animals. So what kind of contingency plans can be put into place for this?
Well, that's kind of where crop insurance comes in, right? So you get crop insurance on production. You can also get crop insurance on things like hail damage. Now more and more there's programs where you can get like canola heat blast insurance, which basically is a temperature insurance. So if there's a certain amount of days over 30 degrees Celsius during the canola flowering time, there will be an insurance payout. Parametric insurance, I believe, is what that is called. So yeah, insurance plays a part for sure. We saw the role and the difference that Mother Nature can make. If we talked about 2021 versus 2022 and the drought maps. You can pretty much, if you look at those maps, you can predict kind of what the production was. In 2021 across the prairies, we had about 14 million metric ton of canola. This past year, I think we're 18 or 19. So a significant difference. Farmers didn't really do anything different. It just rained one year and it didn't rain the other year. So insurance definitely plays a part. Risk management tools such as things like option contracts or forward pricing contracts are available to people that are concerned about trying to take some production insurance. So there is some tools available, but you really got to put the plan together around that too to make sure that you are in the right piece of the risk pendulum that fits your farm business.
Okay, and Shaun, what are things looking like for export options, considering all the political tensions with China and Russia right now? Are we seeing any other doors open to fill those gaps?
Yeah, exports are very important to Canadian agriculture. Not just southern Alberta, all of Canada for that matter. When you look at the exportable commodities, beef, pork, grains, oil seeds, trade is a very, very important component. That's why the importance of trade deals like the USMCA, the CPTPP, CETA to a certain extent. We're hearing a lot about this Indo-Pacific strategy that Canada is currently engaged in. Minister Ng has talked about opening an office in Singapore to really hone in and focus on developing trade in that region. We do have some problems. Of course, some things are totally of the farmer's control. China will always be a variable. It is much different than some of the other Asian countries like Japan or even places like Vietnam. It plays a little bit more of a geopolitical game. Canada still cannot get beef and pork into China, which is kind of a big deal because of the growing middle class and the wealth and their appetite for increasing protein as a component of the diet. So that's something that really not really sure how that comes to conclusion. It's been in place for almost a year now, based on the random case of BSC we had in December of 2021. And so we just kind of wait until China comes around to changing kind of when they decide they need Canadian beef is when probably they'll make a decision on that. But ensuring that we have those trade deals, enforcing those trade deals is also an important component of that comes with any sort of trade agreement.
Okay, and now, Shaun, I know that there are training seminars available for producers. So how common is participation in these? Is it just a majority of producers who attend? Is it a minority? Is it a majority? Or what's going on these days with that?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of different events through the winter time for farmers to partake in. There's everything from more traditional trade shows, finding getting the chance to kick some tires and see what's the latest and greatest in machinery or seed genetics, crop protection products, things like that. That's more of like a B2B business kind of conference, but there also is a lot of learning opportunities through the winter as well. Winter is definitely conference season. And if I look at my Q1 travel schedule for 2023, it is we are out and about all over the place covering meetings and conferences that are happening. A lot of these try to keep farmers up to date on some of the new research, the new information, trying to we talked about putting together that 2023 plan. Well, a part of that is make sure that you have full awareness of all the issues that are happening around you. And so communication on research is one of the key things that happens definitely through the winter time, and exploring new ways of doing things as well. So there is a lot of opportunities all across Alberta, very much across the prairies in Canada and the international for that matter to learn and gaining new knowledge on what is happening in agriculture.
Any upcoming seminars that you personally would recommend for producers?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. There's, if I was to look, if I'm going to look at new or seminars I would recommend upcoming, we've got the Crossroads Conference the end of January happening in Alberta, crop production shows in Saskatoon the second week of January. There also is the Manitoba Ag Days is in Brandon the third week of January. I know myself, I'm looking at going to the NCBA Cattle Convention that's going to be in New Orleans in early February. National Farm Machinery Show is in Louisville, Kentucky. And, the kind of list goes on and on. There's a lot of opportunity for farmers to drive somewhere or fly somewhere to get new information.
Wow, pretty exciting. Absolutely. So, Shaun, how is the ag sector responding to the impact of inflation? I mean, it's on everybody's minds, of course. We can't go a day without hearing about it. So, I mean, we're talking fuel prices have increased, fertilizer, feed, machinery, you name it, not to mention the increase in the carbon tax.
Yeah, all of those are definitely inflationary factors that farmers are having to deal with. The old saying is farmers are price takers, not price makers. So this gets back to having to manage the margin, making sure that from an input perspective, the things that you are buying in order to run your business, your costs of goods, you're buying those as appropriately or as cost effectively as you possibly can. If you look back at the 22 crop, there was a lot of volatility. Now, a lot of that was caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine as one of the factors, especially in the fertilizer market, that created a lot of panic and questions about supply, things like that. If you look at 23, there's a little bit more calmness to it. Fertilizer is still very expensive, but it's a little less volatile. We haven't had these disruptive events that have created a whole bunch of questions on supply. Supply sounds like it's going to be there, but it's still costly. Diesel fuel is something else that has been a little bit difficult to get your head wrapped around. And if you go back to the early summer, there's a lot of questions about, do we have the refining capacity in North America, especially as you look into the Gulf Coast? Is there enough refining capacity to basically meet some of the demand that is out there for diesel fuel? Diesel prices have really kind of backed off, relatively speaking, in the North American market compared to where we thought they were 6 months ago. I know some farmers have been trying to take advantage of that, buying, on regular basis instead of just saying, hey, I need diesel fuel and phoning their bulk supplier and they supply it. Being a little bit more strategic in those purchases, more incremental purchases is definitely something I've heard from a lot of farmers that they've engaged in here in the wintertime.
Okay. There's a lot of talk about the need for a sustainable climate and environment, but there's also a need for sustainable food production for the world's population. So it seems that sometimes those two goals are at odds with each other. Is there a way for this to be attained?
Absolutely. I think a lot of it comes down to understanding. If you think if the consumer says, I want, my food produced in a sustainable manner, you look at a lot of the production practices today, not a lot has to change, if at all, in order to meet some of those asks. I guess it just all depends a lot of time on the words that we use and how we define those words. A couple weeks ago, I was at a conference in Ottawa, and Jack Bobo from the Nature Conservancy gave a great keynote, and he talked about how sustainability is not a destination. Sustainability is a journey. And I think that's something that we should really always keep in mind, is that there's a lot happening in livestock production and in crop production that is much more sustainable in this journey than it was, say, 50 years ago. You look at the advent of direct seeding, no tilling, not disturbing the soil, minimizing that soil erosion, really keeping that moisture in the ground instead of cultivating recreationally. Those are some of the big changes that have happened that have really, really made an impact, not only on production from a farming perspective, but also on the environment. So I think this is one of those things where we're actually closer together than we actually realize that we are. It's just a case of how we define the words and the verbiage that we're using.
Yeah, some very insightful stuff there, Shaun. Thanks so much for being with us today. We really appreciate having you on.
Hey, thanks a lot. Anytime. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Shaun Haney is the editor of realagriculture.com. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.